Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Awaken Your Soul's Journey podcast. I'm Angela, and today I have two special guests, Christopher Mack and Wanda Webster, and they lead groups and do individual coaching to assist people with mental health and well-being struggles. And in this seemingly chaotic and ever-changing world, many people feel unsettled and unsure of their own immense power and place in the world. And their two books, The Journey Within and Isabel's Starry Night, The Magical Quest for Alchemy, are valuable resources to help people find balance and self-empowerment. And so thank you both for being here and for sharing your experience and all you've learned.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
For sure. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about how the two of you ended up doing the work that you do.
When I met Christopher and we started dating, he always talked and had a dream about doing seminars, and he was leading groups in AA, and he was a wonderful speaker. And so I didn't know anything about AA or alcohol, any addiction or Alcoholics Anonymous. And I started taking copious notes so I could understand this program. And one of the ladies stood up in one of his groups and said, "But why am I the way I am?" And I thought, yeah, that's a great question. I can't wait to ask Christopher this. And he said, AA never talks about this. What is the origin of my suffering? And I remember hearing all these stories and these groups of immense trauma and abuse, every single person, things that I couldn't even relate to. And so I started researching, and it clicked in my mind that this was a catalyst. This was something that caused that. The immense suffering, the immense trauma had something to do with them wanting to escape. I can't say that it's 100%. Some people think it is. It's 100% based on past traumas. I'm not quite so sure. I don't have scientific data for that. But I do know that suffering, fragments us. And so now we don't feel whole. Much what we're talking about with grief, and we've both had a lot of suffering and grief and trauma in our lives. So we understand that experience of being, it's like you don't feel yourself. It's like you fragment off, or for me, I used to compartmentalize. Well, I'm just going to stick it over here and I'm not going to deal with that emotion. Mm-hmm. And I became a people pleaser because of that. And the abuse that I received growing up, I was bullied. So I would try to please everybody so they wouldn't pick on me. And that was my addiction. I didn't know it was an addiction until I met Christopher and I started studying this. But so this, we've led groups downtown and so forth, and this turned into a book, and then it turned into two books. And we see how much it encompasses. The material is not just for an addict. It's for anybody soul searching and to find meaning in their life and purpose in their life. And who am I authentically? Who was I told I was supposed to be? Me people pleasing is not an authentic self. You're not. If you're any number of things, we are programmed or expected to be in society, and it takes us away from that inner light, our inner light. So that's how the program started. It's now morphing into something even bigger than I imagined, which is exciting. As I see, when I first wrote the book, nobody was talking about trauma. There was one center in Hawaii talking about trauma associated with addiction. So I was so nervous. But again, that made me realize how connected I am. We believe we have spirit guides and angels, that we have guidance from the other side, that I was getting that guidance. This is not me, not my little brain coming up with this, but it's like guidance telling me where to go with this. And I had to trust that. The same guidance I had when my husband passed away 23 and a half years ago. And it was earth-shattering, life-shattering for me. And I remember driving around and tears just rolling down my face. I couldn't stop crying. And I would see somebody on the corner with a sign that said, need a DJ, looking for a DJ. I kept seeing these signs. Well, his name was DJ. And I found comfort in that, but I didn't quite connect all the dots because I'm much wiser now and I have a much better connection to my spirit guides and angels. So I realize now that was his message to me to say, I'm okay. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. Because I was worried about him still. So I'm going to let you talk for a little bit.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I was addicted. I was addicted for a number of years, ever since I was young. So it's hard to get into my addiction story. I just know the end of it is, I think, more dramatic than anything. So it was in the year 2000, and I was going to buy a rock that's crack cocaine. And I was on my way to buy this rock, and all of a sudden, I was stopped by the police. And I was put in this position where I was going to go to jail, the penitentiary, so to speak, I thought, for 5 years, because I had been to prison for possession of a controlled substance, which was a felony in California. And I was standing there and I realized that, wow, my life is over. I felt, very hopeless. I felt like this is it. I didn't want to be locked up again. And I didn't think I was really doing anything wrong to anybody just because I was using. And all of a sudden, as they were putting the handcuffs on me, I heard this voice says, "You won't see one day in the state penitentiary." Well, that subtle voice got my attention that night. And I said, wait a minute. And I said, what can I do to keep from going to prison? They got me, they have the rock. I'm getting ready to go to prison. I said, but, I went to jail that night. And with the comfort of that still small voice saying, you won't see one day in the penitentiary. 3 days later, they released me on my own reconnaissance. And when I was released, I was released so that I could go into the recovery home, which was called Arena B. And so it was September the 22nd. This is my sobriety day. And I went into the Arena B. And from there, I started to learn about the 12-step program, which today, when I look back, they wanted me to say, my name is Christopher, I'm an alcoholic. But I always wanted to say, my name is Christopher, I'm a human being. And I was listening to Gabor Mate the other day when he was talking about addiction. And he says, sometimes that's really not the Alcoholics Anonymous verbiage that locks you into identifying that. And not identify yourself is not really, it's counterintuitive. It's not productive. And I said, wow, my name is Christopher and I'm a human being. But when I said I was Christopher and an alcoholic, I fell into the Alcoholics Anonymous program. And so I did everything in the program. I got a sponsor and I started to read the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a phenomenal book because I find that addiction is obsessive compulsive behavior disorder. I don't know why they changed the definition for that. However, addiction does not necessarily mean substance. And a lot of times people think addiction is substance, but when the old definition, which is now being erased, obsessive compulsive behavior disorder, it was much better for me at that time. And I realized that, wait a minute, doing the 12-step program, going through each step. The first step in Alcoholics Anonymous is honesty. We admitted we were alcoholics and our lives had become unmanageable. And the evidence was the unmanageability. So I couldn't say my life was manageable because here I was at 1 o'clock in the morning trying to buy a rock of crack cocaine when I should have been at home probably asleep or doing something productive. And so 10 years later, I met Wanda. We were working on in a spiritual workshop. It was hands-on healing. And when she tried to get me to do a certain hand gesture, my ego said, well, I've taken this class already. What are you talking about? Why are you doing this? And,
I think he called me arrogant.
I told her
Overachiever.
overachiever. I called her all kinds of things. And I realized, I was kind of had a soft heart for her. And so I said, okay, well, let's just work on this together, work on the material from the workshop. And I started talking to her, and then I said, wow. And I was telling her that my philosophy about women and dating, because I wanted to be honest. I said, I'm a polygamist. She said, that doesn't work for me. I said, well, what works for you? She said, what works for me is monogamy. I'm looking for a monogamous relationship. I said, I don't know how to do that. I don't know what that is. I was bewildered. And I said, what is that? And she says, well, why don't you try it for 30 days? I said, I don't know what that looks like. And so she says, okay, so just try this commitment for 30 days. I said, okay. And so I tried it for 30 days. And then I asked Spirit, I said, well, what am I going to get out of this? I said, I don't. And then I heard this Spirit voice says, you're going to get spiritual growth and development. And that intrigued me more than anything in the world. Spiritual growth and development. People talk about growing spiritually, but do we ever think about developing spiritually? Because I believe it's our nature, but we don't grow in it. We stay retarded in it. We don't grow, and then we don't develop in it. So growth and development is two things that work together, but sometimes things grow but never develop. And so when the Spirit said, you're going to get spiritual growth and development, I was all in. And I said, okay, I'll try it. Now it's 14 years later. And I realized what spiritual growth and development is, because I'm still in that journey. And the way the dynamics of recovery came was when I started noticing my own subtle changes. And I said, well, this is the dynamics of recovery, and doing groups and being of service, because the triangle of Alcoholics Anonymous is unity, service, and recovery. And so it's through that service we recover, but it's through the unity that we have this sense of wholeness and completeness. And I said, wow. And so 14 years later, here I am, co-author in a book with a wonderful partner that helps me to understand the divine feminine, because masculinity has been so toxic, and the evidence is the condition of our world. So I can't say it's something I want to cheer. But to find the divine feminine is awesome and refreshing.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful story how you met and how you came together from such diverse backgrounds. And now you're doing this amazing work together, writing books and helping people. And so tell me a little bit how grief helps us grow spiritually in your experience.
Well, for me, it's like time stops and the outside is a blur. And this inner movement of energy, I felt like I was imploding, but it's necessary. And that's what our book is about too. It's the journey within. That's where the transformation happens, is that you stop and start examining, and we started re-examining our life, I think, when we have great loss around us, whether it's our partner, whether it's a close friend. It helps us to get in touch with feelings, feel them, transform them, look at it with a different perspective, because if we don't look at it from a different perspective, we could spiral down into that negative, deep, dark hole of victimhood. So we have a choice. There's a path there. Feeling it is necessary to heal. We always say that you must feel it to heal it. However, you have to process it in feeling it. You have to process it with a different perspective. Now I see it differently. And hopefully people, I think I see more and more people getting in touch with this 3D world is a small part of what's going on in the world, in the universe. Christopher, you had an amazing story that happened after your sister recently passed away.
Yeah, but I'd like to kind of like talk about grief. I look at grief as a being. I don't look at grief as an intellectual construct. And most of the time people say grief is this intellectual construct, but grief is a being that comes and visits, and it visits with its companion loss. And so a lot of times grief, when we have grief, we don't let it take its teaching position, because we're trying to push it away, we're trying to deny it, but it's there to help us to understand something. If it's not that this world is bigger than just somebody exiting. One of the things that I realized is that some of our words are constructed poorly. Like if I was to say to you, what's the opposite of death? What would you say?
Life.
See, there's the error.
Yeah.
The opposite of death is actually birth. And birth and death occurs within life. And so when we keep on using this construct to say, oh, this is the opposite of death is life. And I says, but you can't do that, because what you do is you deny yourself access to other parts of life. I think life is consciousness. And I think even in birth and death, there is a limited amount of consciousness, but the expanding of that consciousness can be taught to us through grief.
Yeah.
Grief can actually educate us. However, we're too busy emotionally depleted, thinking that we have lost something, and we can't hear the subtle cues of the individual who we think we lost, because they're there. They're communicating with us. However, we're blinded by grief, because it's an awesome feeling of loss, neglect, dejection, all of those negatives. However, it's an opportunity to go beyond the state of physical. It's an opportunity to go into the subtle realms of our own understanding, which is our mind.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautifully said. I love it.
So getting to what Wanda was talking about. Recently, I lost my sister September the 26th, just a few days. No, it was actually September, a few days before her birthday, which was September the 27th. And my sister was always one of those people, you have one of those people in your family that you say, oh, I can't stand this person. They're out to get me. They're out to hurt me. Everything they do is, it is something. And I was sitting there in the point that she had left and helping her son to navigate the funeral. And I realized that I could hear her saying to me before she even came to earth that, please don't dislike me because of the things that you feel about me, or because of the things that I have to do, because you need this done so you can grow. And I volunteered to do it for you, and said, don't think of me badly or ill. Don't think anything of me, because I'm doing this because you needed it done for your life. And I realized that her leaving, because she was a sort of a villain in my life, which then made me a victim in my life, and the releasing of her nullified the villain and the victim. She was no longer the villain, and I was no longer the victim. That was freedom. That was freedom. You see, one thing people don't understand about Alcoholics Anonymous is that there's this tremendous amount of new freedom. And that was just another new freedom that I experienced, the expression of, don't hold this against me. And I said, wow, you were a villain in my life, but I asked you to do this. So taking responsibility for the way I felt about you now releases me from being the victim to your villain. And no longer are you a villain.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So really it was part of her soul's plan.
Exactly.
And Christopher.
It was our agreement.
Yeah.
It was our agreement. I have Wanda to thank for introducing me to what is an agreement, because I didn't know that people get together based on agreements. They have contracts that they easily break because they're not conscious of the agreement. And
right.
So whenever somebody talks to me about a relationship that they're going through, I always ask them, what's the agreement? What is the agreement that you have? And what I did discover in a healthy relationship, there are 5 C's. Would you like to hear that?
Yeah.
Commitment, communications, cooperation, consideration, and compromise. Those are the 5 C's of a healthy relationship. And these C's are not linear, but they're dynamic in construct.
Beautiful. So yeah, I assume you write about these in your book.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that's in the book too.
I know.
Well, that's interesting. So you were talking a little bit earlier about how trauma or grief can cause a fragment of self. Can you explain a little bit more about soul fragments and what they are?
My understanding is that it's jarring to the individual. So the individual has to have a coping mechanism for it. And most people don't have very good coping mechanisms for challenges, traumas, etc. in life. So what we do is develop some coping mechanism, but a coping mechanism only is supposed to last for so long. But for most people, then that becomes a way of life. For me, it was compartmentalization. That was my coping mechanism because I'm a kid. I don't know how to process emotions. Nobody told me how to do that. I needed to learn how to stick up for myself, but I didn't know that was my lesson. I'm a kid. Mm-hmm. So when that happens, like with compartmentalization, and now you have to be a certain way with somebody and a certain way with somebody else. And for me, constantly trying to get them to, oh, aren't you wonderful? But, people pleasing. That's not a whole person. A whole person is when you can admit your shortcomings and your failures and embrace the negative side of you. Dr. Jung called that your shadow side. We all have a shadow side. And if you don't acknowledge it and you say, oh no, I just have this and I used to think I was so perfect, that's another part of that not being whole, is not recognizing who you are as a whole person. We are the good, the bad, the ugly. There's no way people are here and not making mistakes and bumping into things and, hurting people. And we've all done it. There's no such thing as 100% victim and that everybody else is the bad guy. It's impossible. We are here, everybody's here trying to do their best. And just given the best that we can do at any certain, based on whatever wisdom, knowledge we have. Sometimes, of course I look back and say, well, I could have done that better, but it was all I could do at the moment. So I don't know. Does that answer you?
I got something.
You got something?
Yeah,
okay. Thank
you. Of course,
you.
this is the easiest.
Okay, thank you.
It's
hard for me to describe.
I can describe it.
Okay.
Because it's a societal issue. Society creates the idea that we fragment ourselves. The mom, the teacher, the daughter, the father, the sister, the brother. And these are all roles, and they are fragmentation of the individual. Because you have to give up this. In the work world, I have to give up Christopher just to be out there to earn a living, because they expect me to behave in a certain way. And so society causes the fragmentation, because we're never really 100% who we are, taking ourselves to the next level, because we always have to be something that somebody else expects us to be. Just think about it. A doctor, he's carrying himself in this straitjacket, and he identifies with stethoscope and the white coat for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's 40 hours a week that he's wearing this white coat, and that's his identity. When he goes home to his family, he's somebody else. He's no longer Dr. So-and-so. And so when we talk about fragment, then when we have these places that are challenging, like you said, we start looking for things that make us feel better, and we start doing things, and we start trying to forget things. So I think societal, as it is constructed, that makes us do subjective living. You're this subject in your mind, and you're this object here. So I think that the fragmentation is in society.
I don't think we have a very accepting society of mistakes. There's a stigma against them. I work with little kids, and I sometimes make them do something wrong to make a mistake, because it actually activates the brain more, and you learn better, because the brain then becomes more elastic. But there is a stigma about making mistakes in our society. I don't know if Canada is as bad, but it seems like it's a bit of a worldwide issue. Mistakes are a part of life. They're actually wonderful, because if you're learning from them, that is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we're told that, we're put into that state of competition and comparing ourselves and judging ourselves. And
yes.
And I know, what Christopher was saying about that fragmentation. I mean, when I lost my husband, I was a wife then, right? And then suddenly you're not considered a wife anymore. I retired from my position. I'm not a principal anymore. I moved to a new community, and all of those things you start to realize are just part of that identity, right? And you have to be able to give those up. But in society, we put a lot of importance on that, and I can see what you're saying about the whole fragmentation thing and taking yourself back, learning who you really are, truly are, without all of those roles that you define yourself with.
What did you call yourself?
What did I call myself before?
Yeah, before you got married, before you were a wife, before you were a mother. What did you call yourself? How did you introduce yourself to your little friends? With that first little girl that came up to you and said, "Hi, I'm Rita."
Yeah. Just
how did you introduce you?
Yeah.
How did you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I was just Angela then.
Mm-hmm. See? And how much time did you spend with Angela when you weren't comparing Angela to other things that you thought you should be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I remember as a little girl, a lot of things meaning a lot to me. And I reflect back on that stuff, I want to say pretending I was a penguin in the middle of the pasture in the school ground, or the leaves on the sidewalk when I walked on them, how they crunched. Those were the things that I really remember in my mind. Mm-hmm. And I felt that connection with that. So it's interesting that I don't remember so much the names of the friends that I was with at school, or, it's just fascinating what was important and what is now becoming important again. Right.
Mm-hmm. But the constant was Angela crunching the leaves.
Yes.
Angela, doing those things. Angela, that was you. And that's the authentic you that we try to say to uncover, discover, and discard. Because we bury ourselves in all of those false identities. And so you can almost say that we walk around and wander aimlessly in an identity crisis at any given moment.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And those feelings are hard to take, sometimes when we're starting to separate in that way. And so, yeah. And thus we get back around to the addiction or the numbing or the whatever we need to do to, to get away from it. It's too painful.
I think the first part of grief, really, you want to know when grief really visited you? Grief really visited you when you had to stop being yourself as that little Angela, and you had to be somebody else. That was the first grief. That was the first loss. We lose ourselves in everybody else's wish for us, and we can't ever get back to who we are until we get back there. And we do get back.
Yes. Yes. I'm still getting back.
but it's the journey home. But once again, it's the journey within. And it's within. What do? We accept all of it. Like Wanda said, we accept that dark side. We accept sometimes that we're making less than eloquent choices, and it's in that acceptance that we begin to understand, wait a minute, that's okay. I'm beginning to learn that things aren't as devastating as I would like them to be. When Wanda says, it's not arms and legs. I said, okay.
Something happens. I said, don't worry, it's not arms and legs. It's okay.
But that brings you back to a balance. There is a balance that is you at any given moment in the day. And where do you find that? That's that balance where you're at peace and you're at rest and you're comfortable with yourself. And you're comfortable with your decisions, you're comfortable with your life, you're comfortable in your breath, So we don't know how to discover the subtle part of our own nature, which is what we call spirit, which we call soul. And sometimes it takes being still. And in that knowingness, we're able to relax and let go of our opinion about ourselves.
Everybody has the ability to tap in to guidance from the other side, even to, communicate with their loved ones. Everybody has this ability. It just takes practice. It just takes practice. And you say, well, is it my mind? Is it my imagination? You test the information coming through to make sure that it's from the light, the guidance is from the light. And pretty soon you'll get pretty good at it. Christopher is amazing at it. Do you want to talk about your son?
Yeah.
That could help some people.
So we were going to New York. We were getting ready to go to Niagara Falls, Buffalo. And it was September the 5th, and we were supposed to fly out of there. And I was driving I was on the freeway, and all of a sudden I got the call from my son's mother, and she said he was gone, and we just kept driving.
This is about 7 years ago.
This was in 2017, September the 5th, and I was driving, and it just said, oh, wow, there was nothing I could do at that juncture. And I didn't want to go see his body. And I said, well, let's continue, because we had already paid to go to New York. So we went to New York, and we went to see a psychic.
No, but let's talk about, you did go over to the house. There was an accident.
I didn't go in.
No, I understand that. I understand that.
Mhm.
But you did make an appearance. It was out of the blue. It was an accident with a gun. And he was in his 40s, which was devastating, so just out of the blue to get that type of a phone call. But you're right. I mean, there's nothing you can do.
We had to keep going. So.
Well, this is true, but that's not relevant to the real story of grief.
Well, yes, but it is sometimes the way people handle grief.
Okay.
So people handle grief in all kinds of ways. It was just because I had an understanding of him that gave me the consolation. Who is this guy? What was his purpose? What was he like? And he was always looking to see the underpinnings of life. He always wanted to know what that mystery was about life, you see? And so I used to tell him, I said, we'll get there. Because I said through prayer and meditation and through deep, soul searching, we could get there. And I knew it. And I was always telling him, but he was always anxious to get to see all of those worlds. That was his anxious. And so when he did pass, I understood it from him. I understood what he was looking for. And so when we were on the way to New York, when we were driving, and I know that he had went into the void. And I said, wow, he's in the void. But then I know that from the other side, I have a grandmother, she was my bidine. She grabbed him. And that's what I felt in my heart. This stuff was just coming to me. And so I accepted what it was. And so it was, don't think that because I don't emotionally get tied in it, the grief doesn't bring that desire to see something different, because it does. And when I think of him, sometimes I lament the idea that I don't physically see him. However, when that did happen, I was listening in the world, and he was in the ether, and she grabbed him and brought him into her place. And then telepathically, I said to him, remember the Merkaba. Remember your light body. You could turn it on anytime. And I remember sitting and hearing in my mind. That was him helping other people turn their Merkaba field on. And that was powerful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We don't have the measurement because we use physical things to measure spiritual things, and that's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Because the spirit has an unlimited idea. Eternity is something that I cannot comprehend, no matter how much I would want to. But what I did would get comfort in knowing that he was okay, in knowing that he was turning his Merkaba. Before he died, I gave him a little small Merkaba. So when he turned the light body on, it's even right now, I can feel his presence. Don't think because you hold yourself steady doesn't mean that you don't feel the anxieties of loss. So
I don't know that it ever goes away.
Yeah, well, it does because you start to recognize and realize that there's this other place. There is this soul. There is this thing that is invisible to these five senses that hold us hostage. And it's when we drop the five senses, we're able to see something else come into view.
Yeah. And it brings to me a message that I was told by one of my healers, was that imagination is not nothing. She used to say that. And when I started to be able to allow myself to feel like I had that connection with Blaine, and that I could allow myself to have that conversation with him without the mind going, no, that's not what's happening, then I was able to make that connection and make that connection with the guides. And so it's a beautiful thing, but the mind is, well, we've been told that we can't, we've been
Well,
told.
the mind is good for a lot of things,
Yeah.
Analyzing, executive functioning up
Yeah.
here, planning, prioritizing, analyzing information, critical thinking. It's good for a lot of things. But when you get into the meditation, you've got to calm all of that down and get inspiration in spirit, from spirit, get the guidance from spirit. So you want to calm that rational mind down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And look for the amazing and see the awesomeness of life itself. Remember, I told you, the opposite of death is birth, but birth and death occurs in life because you see it. It's evidence. I see babies being born. I see old men dying, but life still continues.
Right.
Which means that when I walked out of the death door, somebody else is still in life. So life must be something other than the opposite of death.
Right. I love that. Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. Tell me a little bit more about what you do now. I know you've written these books, and I think you're going around and doing some speaking. Obviously, you're on podcast. So where can people find you?
I think we have a lot of podcasts that we're going to be on scheduled. So you can just Google Christopher Mack Wanda Webster podcast and find us. I believe we're guest on it. We're thinking about starting our own podcast. But the best way is, the website is dynamicsofrecovery.com. It has everything there. It has some YouTube videos, a place to buy the books. We actually have cards that we could use, that you can use to instigate conversations. Some podcasts are there, but just all the information. I think it's just easiest to send people to dynamicsofrecovery.com.
Great. Okay, and we'll make sure we have that link.
Great.
Yeah. And is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, but Christopher does a lot of personal consultations with people because he does an energy clearing.
Okay.
Blocked energies, blocked chakras that he can read the energy on. And sometimes that's the best thing for a person that feels stuck, is just to get the energy moving again. And what do you need to concentrate on and get them moving forward in life, get unstuck. But Christopher does those kind of consultations too.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. And so you can obviously on your website be able to find out that information.
Well, yeah, you can email us or call us or whatever. We're pretty accessible.
Okay. Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And I love this conversation. It's been delightful. So
thank you.
Yeah.
And life is challenging.
Yes.
But
yes.
We are stronger than we can imagine. We are stronger than we think or imagine.
And birth and death occurs in life.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I'm going to remember that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much again. And I want to thank everyone for watching. And bye for now.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you.